right now. So good evening, everybody. Again, my name is Mr. Buckley. For the folks that just joined us, welcome to Undergraduate Parent Financial Aid Night. We are joined by two lovely people from Lemoyne College, our Jesuit friends up a little further north. And before we start, again, want to just welcome you all as we get going. You guys may have questions, anything you might want to ask us. Myself and Mr. Gibbons will be monitoring the chat for any questions as we go. I would stray away from asking any super personal financial aid information in the chat, just for the sake of this presentation, as Ms. Mary Walsh and Mr. Maximo Flint Morgan will discuss financial aid from their side of the desk and how that kind of goes about. So again, Mary Walsh is one of our admissions counselors. She's worked with us and our Xavier guys for a number of years. She is amazing. She's incredible to our guys throughout the admission process, and she's just a pleasure to work with. And we're also joined by Maximo Flint Morgan, who is new to Lemoyne, but taking over the director role.
Oh, Jimmy, you're on mute. Sorry.
Yeah. So I definitely just went through a whole spiel about that. Again, welcome. So you guys didn't get the welcome piece then. So I'll backtrack a little. So again, welcome to Underclassmen Parent Financial Aid Night. Super happy to have you here. Again, my name is Mr. Buckley. For those of you guys who don't know me, I'm a college counselor, class of 2013, and I'm joined by Mr. Gibbons and the fine folks at Lemoyne College, which I was just getting into. I was gushing over you guys. And I'm joined by Miss Mary Walsh, who has been our admissions person for a number of years at Lemoyne. Amazing and spectacular to all our guys throughout our admissions time and working with our Xavier boys. And we're also joined by Maximo Flint Morgan, who is new to Lemoyne, but taking over the director role. And let me see if I have this correct. The director of financial aid at Lemoyne College. He's had over 10 years of financial aid experience, having previously worked at Syracuse and contracting with the Federal Department of Education. He's the regional chair of NY State Financial Aid Administrators Association, and he's a member of the National Association of Financial Aid Administrators. So Maximo comes with us with a number of years experience, some really great background, and we're very excited to pass the mic to Lemoyne. But before I do, I just want to go over a couple ground rules because I think that's when I was muted. Please feel free to use the question and answer chat, the chat box below. Myself and Mr. Gibbons will be monitoring that. If you guys have any questions relevant to general financial aid questions, we want to stray away from asking super specific personal information regarding financial aid just for the sake of this meeting. But again, any questions and concerns, you could feel free to write them in the chat and we will monitor them as such. And without further ado, I will pass the mic to the fine folks at Lemoyne.
Thank you, Mr. Buckley. Hi, everybody. My name is Maximo Flint Morgan. Thank you for the very kind introduction. Humbling a little bit about me and why financial aid and how I learned all of this information. So I'm a first-gen college graduate. When I did financial aid, they still had paper forms. There was a paper FAFSA, and I had to translate it for my parents who were not English speakers. And so going through that whole process, you could say that I acquired the only financial aid minor in the country. I'm kidding, there is no financial aid minor, but just by doing it and learning it, and it's become a passion of mine. And so that is how I ended up in financial aid all of these years. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen and hopefully be able to begin this wonderful presentation, possibly, maybe. So as you can see, the title of our presentation is What You Need to Know About Financial Aid. This is going to be essentially your brief crash course in financial aid basics. If you have questions, please ask them. Every question is a valid question. If I go over things too quickly, if I speak too quickly, if you really want to know about something else, please don't hesitate to ask. If you don't ask, you won't know. And if you don't know, it could literally cost you thousands of dollars. So please ask any questions that you have. So brief agenda topics that we're going to discuss. What is financial aid? When you are talking with a college, excuse me, and you mention financial aid, what are they envisioning in their minds, and how is that different from what you're envisioning in your mind? The cost of attendance, or the COA, the expected family contribution, or the EFC, financial need, categories, types, and sources of financial aid, the free application for federal student aid, and then special circumstances, which is always a fun time. Right. So what is financial aid? Financial aid consists of funds provided to students and families to help pay for post-secondary educational expenses. That is any money, federal, private, or otherwise, a loan, scholarship, grant, or working and getting paid, that is going to be used for paying for college. All of that is financial aid. So when you call a school and say, how come I have all of these loans in my financial aid package? They're going to say, well, that's part of financial aid. Why are we going to say that? The Federal Department of Education tells us to do that. It's literally the law. Okay, so what is the cost of attendance? The cost of attendance includes tuition and fees, room and board, books and supplies, transportation, miscellaneous personal expenses. What I like to say to families or to anyone who asks me as I'm talking financial aid, the cost of attendance is from shoelaces to shampoo and everything in between to attend college, right? That's what it's going to cost you. It is the sticker price, as I'm doing air quotes for folks who can't see me, sticker price that allows folks who want to pay cash for everything to compare schools evenly. If there is no financial aid, if there is no loans, if there is no anything, what is the cost of one school compared to another school? What's the cost of attendance? That's what you want to ask, right? Or to Google or to find on a website. What is the cost of attendance? Juxtaposed against that is what is the expected family contribution, right? So the EFC, it's the measurement of a student's and family's ability to pay post-secondary educational expenses as measured by the FAFSA, right? So there's a portion that's the student contribution, and then there's a portion that's a parent contribution for students who have parents, right? So like barring foster care or some special circumstances like that. You'll end up with an EFC after the FAFSA, and that stands for the expected family contribution. It is not what it will cost to attend college. It's more of an index number that financial aid professionals use to calculate eligibility, right? So if your EFC is 0, will you have to pay nothing for college? Unfortunately not. You'll probably see some costs. However, that usually means that you have high need. So, right. So our next slide, what is financial need? It's the cost of attendance, or the COA, minus the expected family contribution, and that is your financial need. So that's how aid administrators are going to be calculating need or eligibility for need-based aid. So basics, crash course, what is financial need, right? So let's move on to categories of financial aid. Financial aid folks, as you can tell, are very creative. We like to slice and dice. So from what you can see on your screen, there are essentially 2 categories of financial aid. There is need-based aid and then non-need-based aid, aid that is based on other criteria, right? So think merit scholarships, think scholarships of other eligibility requirements, athletics. I mean, the options are endless. Why? Because it's literally everything that's not need, right? So another way to slice and dice financial aid, the types of financial aid. we have scholarships, right? So these can be based on merit, right? Or a student's high school GPA, if the school that your student is interested in, if they're looking for test scores, what were the test scores that might make them eligible for some sort of scholarship. It could also be based on athletics. It could be based on performance of other measures. If your student is an excellent oboe player, there may be an oboe performance scholarship, something along those lines, right? So these are scholarships based on performance, academic achievement, or achievement of some kind. Next up, grants. So these are free monies or gift aid that is not based on merit. Oftentimes it's based on need. So at Lemoyne College, we have some need-based grants, and they are called Lemoyne College grants. They are not scholarships. It's a difference of wording there, but it is important in some situations. You'll also notice on the right that both scholarships and grants are considered or sliced and diced in another way. Gift aid, free money, money that does not have to be paid back, right? So your scholarships, free money, your grants, free money. Next up, work study or employment, right? So the federal work study program is a program that is a need-based program. The eligibility is based on the information on the FAFSA. So if you start with the cost of attendance minus your EFC, your financial need, if there is some need eligibility there, your student may be eligible for some federal work study. And this is money that would have to be earned, right? So you'd have to show up to work, find a job, keep a job, and then you will be paid, or you will see, depending on the institution, a reduction in charges. And last but not least, everyone's least favorite part of financial aid, myself included, loans, right? So there are a few different loan programs. There are federal subsidized, which is a need-based loan program. Then there's the federal unsubsidized loan program. There are also parent loans, and then there are even more loans for graduate students. And this would be additional self-help aid, because loans, as the name implies, would have to be paid back. Some institutions have institutional loan programs, or they might have income share agreements where they will loan the student X amount of dollars. In return, a student agrees to repay a percentage of their disposable income for 5 or 10 or 15 years after graduation. So that's another version of a loan, which would be considered self-help aid. So you have your gift aid on the right, free monies, scholarships, grants, self-help aid on the left, loans and work study, money that would have to be earned or paid back, right? So moving forward, the sources of financial aid. So here we see a wheel at the top at the 12 o'clock hour. We see the federal government at roughly 3 o'clock, states who also have some financial aid dollars for their citizens. Colleges and universities will often have financial aid, merit scholarships, need-based programs for students. Private sources, so these would be things like your local church groups oftentimes have some scholarship money, possibly the local Rotary Club, the Elks Club. These kinds of civically minded organizations oftentimes have also some financial aid available for students. And then employers oftentimes use financial aid in their benefit packages for the employees. So whether that's the student's employer or the parent's employer, it can come from a variety of sources. But let's talk about the biggest ones first, right? Where does most of the money come from? The largest provider of financial aid in the United States would be the federal government. It's the single largest source of financial aid. Aid is primarily provided on the basis of financial need from the feds. And that eligibility is calculated annually from the FAFSA. The FAFSA is an acronym for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. It's been around a long time. It used to be a multi-page document. It is now an app which you can download and complete while I'm speaking to you or at you or with you. And there are certain eligibility requirements that must be met in order to receive any aid from the federal government. Moving on to a listing of federal student aid programs. These are a combination of free money or gift aid as well as loan programs. So the federal Pell Grant, the Iraq Afghanistan Service Grant, the Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant or FSEOG, the TEACH grant, the Teacher Education Assistance for College and Higher Education grant. That, for folks who were, I know, wondering which one of these is my least favorite, the TEACH grant is my least favorite. It's because it's not a grant. It is a, it's called a groan, which is kind of funny. It's half grant, half loan. And so students have to agree to work in a high need educational field in a high need district for 8 years after they obtain it in order to actually have it be a grant. So there's a big asterisk there for me. But moving forward, Federal Work Study or FWS, the Federal Direct Student Loan Program, and the Federal Plus Loan Program, and one that's not on here but should be the Graduate Student Plus Loan Program. So this is a short listing of some federal student aid programs. The next largest supplier of financial aid for students would be states, whether that happens to be a New York, New Jersey, or some combination thereof of something nearby. They would usually have some residency requirements for the states. Aid may be provided on the basis of both merit and need. So in the state of New York, we do have both styles of programs. The application is separate from the FAFSA, but it's going to ask you very similar information. And each state will have a variety of deadlines. So you would want to work with your state's higher education area in order to find those, if there are any. Moving on. The third largest, colleges and universities, which would have aid provided on the basis of both merit and need. The aid may be free monies, or they may be loans or some sort of work option. Universities and colleges will use either FAFSA or institutional applications or some combination, right? So sometimes it's a little bit of both. Some universities use this application called the CSS profile, and this is an additional application. So you would have to complete your FAFSA and then complete the CSS profile at those institutions in order to be considered for all dollars. With my experience with the CSS profile, what I can advise everyone is the CSS profile feels like the FAFSA kind of turned up to 11, right? FAFSA on steroids, if you're a baseball fan and you remember the Sammy Sosa days, that's usually, or the Mark McGwire days, that's usually what it feels like for people. It's just jumped up, and the deadlines are going to vary by institution. So every school is going to have a different deadline for their own applications, which is very similar to the admissions application deadlines. So usually the institution will try to keep those together. Next up, private sources, foundations, businesses, churches, civics, and other charitable organizations oftentimes have financial aid or scholarships available for their students. The deadlines and the application procedures are going to vary between one and the other. So if you happen to live in an area that has a key club, and which would be something of a Rotary, and then you have an Elks Club, you'd have to work with both clubs to apply and be considered. And you do want to begin researching private sources early. In financial aid land, we do encourage folks to consider the local options at a higher priority than national options for private scholarship dollars. And here's why. If you are if in your zip code there is a Rotary Club and you think, well, in my zip code there are what, 3,000, maybe 2,000 or 400 high school seniors. Out of those people, who is going to apply for this scholarship, maybe a fourth. And then that would be your competition, right? So whatever that works out to be. Nationally, you're talking hundreds of thousands of other applicants that you're competing with. So you should truly prioritize local scholarship dollars in terms of making sure that you do know when the deadlines are. You are submitting applications so that folks can have the highest percentage shot to actually receiving those dollars. So that's my that's my little pitch for keeping it local there. Employers. So some employers may have scholarships available to the children of employees. Some may have educational benefits for their employees. Other employers have endowed scholarships at other universities. So you really want to ask around. That usually happens at your friendly neighborhood HR department whenever you happen to be either emailing or coming across it, and just asking that question, hey, are there any scholarships available to the children of employees? Are there any benefits? Some employers have begun offering a loan payback options also. So there's all sorts of things that are happening at the employer level. All right, so the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid. What is the FAFSA and why is it important? So let's start with what it is. The FAFSA is going to collect demographic and financial information. So it will ask you for your name, the student's name, the address, dates of birth, social security numbers. It's going to ask for the amount of money that was earned by both student and parents from 2 years ago. So if your student will be hopefully starting college in the fall of 2022, that means that the income tax return that you filed for tax year 2020, aka the tax return that is due, I think now May 17th. That's the income tax return that will be used to calculate the FAFSA eligibility. All of that information, your household information, is going to be used to calculate the EFC, and colleges and universities are going to use the EFC to offer financial aid. The FAFSA is available in 20 plus different languages, predominantly available in English as well as Spanish, and the app can be easily translated. There is a parent side to the app as well as a student side to the app. Not that I'm trying to plug the app, but it's just easier for some families. So anyway, you can complete it at any time during the academic year, but you must wait until October 1st. So again, if your student is trying to begin their college days in the fall of 2022, that means that the first day that you can complete a FAFSA is October 1st, 2021, which I'm not sure how many days we have until then. Whoops. But we're, something around 200 days, but who's counting, right? I got my planner right here. That's why anyway. So October 1st, 2021, that's when the FAFSA becomes available. I should have updated this. It says beginning 2020. I apologize, everybody. How embarrassing. Anyway, colleges are going to set their own priority deadlines and dates. So you certainly want to keep an eye out on the college's websites in order to be sure that you're not missing anything, or if you complete it by the 1st, or if there's a deadline on November 15th, that you can plan your Saturdays accordingly. The FAFSA, all of the methods that you can do it, you can do it online at studentaid.gov. The mobile app, which is the myFAFSA or myStudentAid mobile app, you can request a paper FAFSA from the Department of Education. They're going to have to mail one to you. You will have to mail it back, ink signed, and it will significantly slow your processing time. Whereas if you do it online or through the app, the school can have that information within 48 hours. The paper FAFSA is going to be measured in weeks in terms of processing. It is also possible to complete the FAFSA over the phone. For folks who may not have the capability of being able to see, you can certainly do that over the phone. And there is additional assistance on CPS Online. So the benefits of using it on the web or through the app. There are measures that are built in order to help you save money. So built-in edits to prevent costly errors. It also has skip logic to help you avoid unnecessary questions. The FAFSA wants to, so let me back up. The goal of the FAFSA is to get your family's entire financial life on a screen or a piece of paper. It's a flawed goal. It's not easily achievable. And everybody's financial life is usually complicated. It's usually not easy. It's usually a little this, a little of that. So it's hard. So if the software provides you an opportunity to take the easy button, to hit the easy button, to make this simpler, please take it. Please, 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 please take it. It's going to help the financial aid office quick process your financial aid application, be able to provide you quick and accurate information. It's going to help make this entire process slightly less stressful. So please try to do it online. It also has the opportunity to import the information from the IRS directly, so you don't even have to look at your tax return. You could just link to the IRS, and the IRS will bring that information over directly, making this entire process even faster than it was before. So many years ago, I used to counsel families every year that you want to do some FAFSA, find an open Saturday, sit down with a cup of coffee, plan 2 hours, right? Now you don't have to do that. It could be 15 minutes on your phone, and you could be watching TV and only working on it in the commercial breaks. I mean, it's really a heck of a lot easier. If there are commercial breaks with however you consume TV now, it's COVID times, it could be anything, right? So apologies. Again, I think I'm dating myself, so I'll keep it moving. All right. Again, more timely submission of the original application. It does have better instructions if you're doing it online or through the app. You can check the status of the application online, whereas if it's on paper, you're essentially hoping that it gets delivered. And it also offers you the renewal option when you complete it online. So when you do it next year, because you have to do it every year, it'll be easier, even easier then. So as you're on Federal Student Aid or StudentAid.gov, you will find the Apply for Aid button up top, and then you will log in. And you can either log in as the parent or the student. And this is what it looks like. This is a screenshot, right there. If you're going to do it on the app, same thing, right? You are hopefully charged up all the way, and you will start here, right? So you download it, and then you would have the ability of saying, I'm the parent, I'm a student, and then moving forward. The first F in FAFSA is free. So you can have the option of keeping it free, but if you really, really want help and you call the school of your choice and you don't want them to help you, you can pay someone to help you. But just know that you're crossing out the first F in FAFSA, a free one. So some folks do that. I would encourage you to at least try the free way. Free is usually better in my experience. But anyway, so the information is protected on the app just the same as it would be through the FAFSA on the web. So it's the same security. It's going to prompt you to create a save key in case your phone dies halfway through the application. That save key will let you come back in halfway through the application. Or if you only know part of the information now, but you want to save it and come back to it later, that save key that you create at the beginning is your password for the application. It's not your FSA ID password. That's how you sign it. The save key is slightly different. And then the completion itself is also tracked, right? So it's going to say student information, school selection, the dependency status, the parent information, all sorts of fun things. You will want to agree to the terms. You can certainly read them and you can certainly print them to read them. But at the end, it will also show you your EFC. So in green in the middle of the screen, I don't know if you guys can see my mouse cursor, but in this simulated Tammy, student Tammy, the EFC was $12,721. So certainly some need there. The IRS data retrieval tool. So this is inside of the FAFSA. It's a fancy acronym. It's like government loves acronyms, right? That essentially allows you to pull the information that you already gave to the IRS to put it onto the FAFSA. So it allows for certain tax return info to be transferred from the IRS information. You do not have to use the data retrieval tool, but you should really, really try to. It's just going to make it easier. It's again, it's another opportunity of hitting the easy button. It'll link you to the IRS. It'll ask you to verify your information, the mailing address that you put on your tax return. And if everything works out, the IRS will kick over all of your data to put it on your FAFSA. Also, it will allow the financial aid office to ask less of you later if we have to get more information, if we have to verify all of the information on the FAFSA. The fact that you pulled it in from the IRS means that, well, we're not going to ask you for your taxes, which is always a hassle for both parents, students, and for the financial aid office. Trust me, the financial aid office is not choosing to verify your information. It is our job as dictated by the Federal Department of Education. So certain tax filers cannot use the IRS data retrieval tool, so not everyone can hit the easy button. Folks who did not indicate on the FAFSA that the tax return was completed, if you were married in that calendar year, so instead of January 2020, it should say January 2021 or later. Again, my apologies. If the first three numbers of your social security number are 666, that means that you cannot use the data retrieval tool. Only citizens with certain or from certain territories in the United States have those SSNs, and so that's who those folks are. If you filed a non-US tax return for 2020, so if you filed one in Guam, the IRS does not have that information. If you are married and you filed head of household, or if you are married and you filed separately, the IRS data retrieval tool will not be an option. If neither parent has a valid SSN, the data retrieval tool won't work. Or if the SSN is all zeros for whatever reason, the data retrieval tool won't work. So the FSA ID. The FSA ID is used for FAFSA completion and allows access to certain U.S. Department of Education websites. It can be used by parents throughout the financial aid process, including every other year after college freshman year. And there's only one person per FSA ID. So parents can't share FSA IDs, right? Parent one has parent one FSA ID, parent two has parent two FSA ID, if you want your own. And the student also needs their own FSA ID. So that's another caveat, but that FSA ID is how you will electronically sign the FAFSA. There is a, if you're going to do it on paper, each year the FAFSA has a fancy color. So for 2021, the color was purple. So there's some of that. So here's a preview of questions that would be asked regarding the parent and the student. So again, name, social security number, alien registration number, citizenship status, all sorts of things. So the general student information, you're going to need the student's SSN, citizenship status, marital status, drug conviction or possession or sale. That would only be applicable if that occurred while receiving federal student aid. So that's not applicable to folks who haven't attended college before. For males, it's selective service registration and the highest level of education completed by either parent. So that's student information. The FAFSA is also going to ask a set of yes or no questions to figure out whether or not we are going to require parent information. These questions are yes, no, and if the answer is no to all of the questions, then the student is considered a dependent on their parents. It has nothing to do with whether or not you claim them on your taxes, if they filed their own taxes, if they live half on their own, but then half at my house. It has nothing to do with that. It's a set of questions that are yes, no. Those questions can include, but are not limited to, is the student currently active duty? Is the student a veteran? Is the student married? Does the student have any children for whom he or she will provide 51% or more of their support? All of these kinds of questions. If you have questions about those questions, please contact your local financial aid office, which can be found at Lemoyne College or at any other college. Information of the parents of dependent students. Yes, sorry, I got a bunch of things open. So we're going to ask for the parents, or of the parents, we're going to ask income, the amount of income tax paid, and a whole bunch of other financial information. We are going to ask about a dislocated worker status. If you are receiving means tested federal benefits in the past 2 years, sometimes we will even ask about assets or other untaxed income, which can be, there's all sorts of untaxed income. For whatever reason, the only or the best example that jumps into my brain right now would be considered combat pay. So that's untaxed income. Information about a student and the spouse, right? So yes, the student's income information, the taxes paid, a whole bunch of financial information, their dislocated worker status, if they received means tested federal benefits in the past 2 years, untaxed income, assets, very similar questions. Oop. We are also going to ask on the FAFSA your housing plans, if you're going to live on campus or if you're going to hope to commute, if there is a preparer for your FAFSA, and which colleges would you want to send a copy of the FAFSA to. There is a limit of 10 colleges. So if you're considering more than 10, submit your FAFSA with your first slew or slate of 10 colleges. And then you go back and you remove 5 or 6 and then add your next slate of colleges and hit the submit button once again. And all of the colleges will receive a copy of your FAFSA. The colleges will not see the other colleges on your FAFSA. So add them all. It's not going to show up on our end. It's as simple as I can make that part. The signatures, they will be required of the student and of one of the parents for a dependent student. And you will do so using your FSA ID if you're going to do it on the app, or if you're going to do it online. If you're going to do a paper FAFSA, you're going to need to make sure you include the signature page of the FAFSA. So the top 10 FAFSA errors, are there even, no, 8, sorry. The top 8 FAFSA errors. Social security numbers, you want to make sure that you get those correct. The parental marital status information, you want to make sure that you get that correct. The income earned by the parent or the step parent. The untaxed income. The biggest one, and this one is a pet peeve of mine. If you have income taxes paid, make sure that you get credit for each and every dollar that you paid in income taxes. Those dollars are completely removed in the calculation, so make sure that you get that number right. The household size, how many people in your household that are being supported by you. Out of those people, how many will be in college? And if you own other real estate aside from your primary home, what is the net worth of that real estate, right? So if you own a duplex, you'd have to do some fancy things, some calculating, right? You'd cut your primary home in half and then report that half. That's a duplex. If you own multiple properties, you would do the net worth or the assessed value of all of the properties minus the debt against. So that's your net worth. So what happens after you hit the submit button? Well, once you hit the submit button, it's going to go to CPS, which is not Child Protective Services. It is the Central Processing System. They will be in charge of sending it to the college, and then they will send a copy of the FAFSA to the student. And you will also, well, your student will also receive a copy of the SAR, or the StudentAid report. And it looks a lot like the thing on the left. It's essentially a PDF with a whole bunch of lines, but the important part up top is the EFC, which I understand is very small, but it will be there. The SAR will tell you the EFC, as well as all of your answers to each individual question. If you wanted to count how many questions were skipped, you can certainly do so. The SAR acknowledgement will be sent if a paper FAFSA is filed without providing an email address. And also it will be mailed if the FAFSA on the web process was used without providing an email address. The school is going to receive something called an ISIR, which will tell us if we have to request additional information if your student was selected for verification. Excuse me. Making corrections. If you complete your FAFSA and you found that you inadvertently made yourself a millionaire, if you added a couple of extra zeros, you can certainly make those changes. You can log back in and correct the information. You can, if you receive it on paper and you want to do it on paper, you can certainly make that correction on paper. It's going to take weeks to process, so you should really consider doing it online. Or you can send substantiating documentation to the school or college's financial aid office, right? So hypothetically, if your income was $100,000, but you accidentally made it $10 million, if you send the school a copy of your tax return, we'll be able to make that differentiation. Or what about special circumstances? What if in 2020 you were working, but by the time 2022 rolls around, you're no longer employed? Your finances have changed, right? The FAFSA is asking for income information from 2 years ago, and things aren't looking the same as they were then. What can you do? You should really call the school's financial aid office and start having a conversation about what is going to be your best way to move forward. Depending on your circumstances, the college will review, work with you, and request some additional information if necessary. So in the scenario I laid out, you were working in 2020, you're no longer employed in 2022. If you're filing for unemployment benefits, our office may ask you for a statement from the Department of Labor saying, hey, show me what is your weekly benefit from unemployment benefits. And a decision of making changes to your FAFSA based on your new circumstances is actually the responsibility of the school, and the school only. You can't call up the Department of Education and say, well, they didn't do it right. So the Department of Education is going to say, we don't really have a hand in this. It's up to the school. So they are final and they cannot be appealed past the school. Other circumstances, if there's a divorce, if God forbid somebody passes away, if the parents aren't around, if they're incarcerated for whatever reason, if there's unusual medical or dental expenses, all of these things. These are all special circumstances, and you should certainly call the financial aid office to have a conversation. I can tell you that the financial aid office will not share your information with offices that wouldn't need to know. We would only want to do what's in the best interest of the student to make college a possibility for them. So if you're worried about sharing information about your family's finances that maybe you don't want to share past those who need to know, the financial aid office can keep it to a need to know basis. So I would encourage you to reach out and at very least have a conversation about what would be needed or warranted depending on the circumstances. Oh, and that's the end of my slide deck. Wow. Well, that went a lot faster than I thought. All right. I'm going to stop sharing. Okay. Can you all still hear me? I should have asked that a lot earlier, huh?
Absolutely. It's been loud and clear and excellent information, concise.
So Max, there are a couple questions in the chat. So Tom, do you want to lob them in too?
Sure. So there was a question regarding 529 plans and how would a college view them and how are they accounted for on the FAFSA?
So it depends on who is the owner of the 529 plan. So if the parent is the owner, it would have to be reported as a parent asset. If the FAFSA is asking you, if the grandparent is an owner, then they're not going to ask you. And depending on your income information, instead of the question being, please list all of the 529 dollars that you have, it might be, is the sum of all of your assets more than $70,000? And you can answer yes or no. So it might ask it that way, depending on the version of the easy button that you happen to be on.
Excellent. There was also a question, and I answered this, but then I asked myself, do I really know the answer? Are there alternatives to be considered for financial aid other than the FAFSA?
I'm sorry, all I got was alternatives.
Sorry about that. Is there an alternative to the FAFSA to be considered for financial aid?
Yes and no. Depending on the school, each school is going to ask for may ask for a supplemental financial aid application. That may be the CSS profile. It may be a sheet that's the size of one page asking you some other information. Having worked at a school that used the CSS profile, they're going to also ask you to complete a FAFSA. You may not want to do them both, but it would behoove you to leave all of your options available. That would be how I would answer it. So yes and no. Are there other ones? Technically, there are others, but you really want to start at the FAFSA.
Right. And what we usually advise families who are seeking financial aid, you have to do the FAFSA. And if a school requires the CSS profile, if you do one and not the other, if you do the FAFSA and not the profile, you won't be able to be considered for all the aid you may be eligible for. Would that be correct?
Absolutely, 100%. If your hope is to kick over every rock, to find every available dollar, then unfortunately that means that you're going to be spending some time on the FAFSA and any other application under the sun. And so that's where you'll be, for better or for worse.
And then, if you don't like the FAFSA, you really won't like the CSS profile. I like the description of turning up the FAFSA to 11 for all the
yes, turning it up to 11.
Not in the fun way where you're going to smile, but it's worth the time. It's worth the time if you're looking for it. One of the first questions was, hi, Maximo, just to clarify, FAFSA only looks back 1 year at tax returns?
Yeah, so technically it's looking back to 2 years ago. But it is only considering 1 year's worth of taxes. So that brings up a good point that I hadn't raised. Say because of COVID and stuff happening in reality, that you took a withdrawal from a 401k to keep your family whole as best as you could. When you complete your FAFSA for 22-23 school year, your income, if you just took, like if you had like your regular wages plus your 401k distribution, is going to look really inflated. And so that would be a special circumstance. That would be something that you'd want to reach out to the financial aid office and say, look, during COVID, we did this thing. It's not really what we earn. Please look at my other tax years.
Excellent. And let's see, if you have two students go in college at the same time, either going in at the same time or one goes in 1 year and a year or two later, another goes in. How would a family work with the FAFSA in that situation?
So the FAFSA is going to ask you household information. So if there's two parents and there's two students, it's going to say, all right, well, that 2 + 2 is 4 in your household. How many of those 4 are in college? And so if you have one older student and one a younger student, it'll be 1 for the first year, and then maybe 1 for the second year, but then it might jump up to 2 for the third year. And so the calculation will take that into consideration, and you will see increased need when you have 2 students. The only thing that I would caution you is that in that scenario for your younger student, it may feel a little bit like a bait and switch, because they enter with higher need, but they might graduate with a lot less need because the older student might graduate. So it is a marathon, and that is something to certainly plan for.
All right. Let's see. What is the CSS profile? I missed that. The CSS profile is Max. I'll let you handle the dictation on that, and it is through the College Board, but I'll let Max give you the details on that. If that's cool.
Yeah, sorry, I just realized that I accidentally kicked and unplugged my power cord, so that's why I was like jumping around. Anyway, I'm back, I promise. So the CSS profile is hosted by the College Board. It is a supplemental financial aid application that is used by 100+ schools and colleges. A lot of institutions use that application to review for their own institutional dollars. So if they're offering it, it does cost money. It's not a free application, right? So the CSS profile, I think, is like $18 per school, and not every school asks for it. And some schools have vouchers, and there's a whole thing there. I can tell you that Lemoyne College does not use the CSS profile. We are a FAFSA only school. Other schools who do use the CSS profile can actually customize the form itself. So you may see the CSS profile ask you some school A only questions and not some school B only questions. I would certainly, at very least, call the financial aid office of the school that is asking you for the CSS profile and find out what they're going to use it for. Is it for need-based aid? If so, then consider using it. If it's for endowed awards, maybe, right? Have a conversation with them, because it will cost you a little bit of money up front.
And it's always in your best interest, if your son is considering a school seriously, to make friends with the financial aid office once they've been admitted. It's just a good line of communication to have, because once you're done with admissions and you're not completely done with them if you don't want to be, but you will have a relationship potentially with financial aid for 4 years.
And Tom, I was going to say another important thing to keep in mind is to have a conversation in your family about finances before all of the applications come through. And that's something, even from an admission standpoint, I found that many students, they apply, they don't really think about what the cost is going to be. They get accepted, they get, maybe get their heart set on things, but really become familiar with the financial aid pages of the institutions that you may be considering applying to. I know, specifically with Lemoyne, in addition to a lot of the other Jesuit institutions and private institutions, we have merit scholarship, and many of the schools publish, what's the criteria for some of those top scholarships. So it gives you an idea of what kind of earnings, you may be, or discount you may be getting off of your tuition based on merit. When we're reviewing from the admissions office standpoint, students' applications, especially students that are from Xavier, we know the rigor of the curriculum. We want to be able to give those students as much merit scholarship as we can. And many of the Jesuit institutions have specific Jesuit merit scholarships. So really I encourage you to explore that. And that's something that students can do over the summer, before those applications. Take a look at those websites, become familiar, and connect with admissions counselors as well, because those are questions that they can ask any admissions counselor. If you have a student that is very strong academically, high 90s or mid 90s, and if they happen to take a test score and that that's going to make a difference, even though many colleges are test optional, it's okay. We want to answer that. What kind of merit scholarship might I receive with a 95 GPA and say a 1300 on the SAT? They should be able to give you an estimate. So that's just my tip from a parent, and I have 3 kids in college right now. So the finances are really important. And I think it's never too early to have those conversations.
All right, let's see. There was a statement. Did I hear correctly that if the grandparents own a 529 plan, that is not something that will show up in the application?
Well, that is correct. The FAFSA is going to ask you for student assets, and it's going to ask you for parent assets. If the 529 is owned by the grandparents, those people aren't on the FAFSA. That being said, the CSS profile is going to ask for anyone's assets that are earmarked for a student, which would include grandparents. So that's one of those times when they turn it up to 11, I guess, is the metaphor we're going with today.
Yeah, and it's safe to say, even after you submit the CSS profile, some schools will ask for more verification of the information you provided. So if you think you can hide it that way, it will be found. Darn CSS profile.
We are sneaky.
School like Lemoyne wants to help you. Just remember that, folks. Do they consider that you have a child in college and you're also paying tuition for Xavier or for the second child, or did they take in high school tuition into consideration when reviewing the FAFSA?
Not as a standard practice. So the FAFSA won't give you that coverage in the formula. It can, or the office can, depending on what's happening with your student. So that I would file under special circumstances and certainly reach out to the aid office for consideration on that.
In my experience, you do absolutely, like Max said, knock on the door, see what they say, but it's highly unlikely that you will be given more aid. It's a choice to pay for high school, as I believe how most schools will see it, where you can go receive your free and appropriate public education. It's not something they consider unless your other child has significant disabilities. I think that will garner more of a consideration. There's a question, if a grandparent is the custodian of someone submitting the FAFSA or filing the FAFSA, how is that considered?
So it depends on the actual custodianship, right? So if you are a biological grandparent, but your student is with you through foster care, that's one way. If you have legal guardianship, that's another way. If the student emancipated themselves from their parents, but then resides with a grandparent, that's a third way. So you'd really want to pay attention to the questions on the FAFSA that asks you that, because it gets very specific very quickly, and there isn't a general answer for that circumstance, unfortunately.
Got it. Thank you. How is funding to retirement savings weighted in terms of income? For example, if we increase our contribution to our retirement program, would it reduce our net income?
Well, yes, it will reduce your net income, but I think the question that you're asking is it going to make my EFC lower and therefore make me appear needier? The FAFSA is going to ask you for pension contributions specifically, so it would be box 12 with a 2. So unfortunately, it depends, but Can you make your AGI lower? Yes. Is that going to actually help you on the financial aid applications? I don't know.
Yep, and everyone's in a little bit of a different situation. It depends on what your income is, your total income is, versus how much you're going to contribute to a plan, in whatever aspect, I believe. Is that correct, Massimo?
Yes.
Is it recommended that everyone submit the FAFSA? If I could jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, or if there's more to add to it, but Xavier, I typically recommend that a student, family files the FAFSA. If you want to be considered for aid or federal loans, you need to. If you don't, you won't be, and you'll get whatever merit-based aid you receive in your package, but not any kind of federally based aid. And that's a tricky-ish question depending on the schools you're applying to sometimes, but I won't put the financial aid people into that equation right now. And that is something that if you want to have a conversation on the phone about, I'm more than happy to. I'm going to leave it at that. Let's see. There's a suggestion about a good book to complement our presentation today by Keith. Thank you. And I think that looks like the questions for now. Yeah. If there's any other questions, feel free to type in the chat, or you can always reach out to myself or Jimmy at any time. If we can answer your questions, we will. We do have experience in the realm, but we don't help you fill out the FAFSA. We don't help you fill out the CSS profile. We can point you in the right direction, but it's our belief that the best conversation to have regarding the FAFSA, if you're having trouble filling it out, is with the FAFSA people on the helpline. They're usually pretty good. And then once you've been admitted to a college and received the package, or even before that, to initiate a conversation with the financial aid office at that school. Yes, Ms. Genovese, who is
I'm sorry, was that?
I'm sorry, Max, go ahead. Question?
No, I wasn't sure if you had asked a question or not. I think I'm experiencing a low network bandwidth, so I apologize.
Sure. We have taken a lot of your time. We appreciate that. Another question or another statement. If you don't file the FAFSA in year one, you cannot file in future years and be eligible for aid. Is that correct?
No, it is not correct. I'm glad I can dispel a myth. A FAFSA is an application for benefits that you would be eligible for higher education as a citizen or eligible non-citizen. A school can't keep you from those benefits, so you can submit your FAFSA every year. I still file a FAFSA every year. I understand I'm biased, and that's fine, but yeah, you can file a FAFSA each and every year.
Great. So even if you don't file the first year your student's going in, you can file in subsequent years?
Yes, and the school is obligated to use that information to offer aid. It would then be up to the student to decide if they want to use that aid, but the school must offer aid. So whether that's a Pell Grant or a subsidized loan or unsubsidized loan or federal work study, like whatever, but the school option.
Got it. Excellent. Well, Max, Mary, amazing job tonight. Families, we've recorded this. If you have any questions that we can help answer at Xavier, we're happy to do our best to do that. Great job. I want to thank Jimmy Buckley and Melissa Cassidy, our office superstar, for setting all this up. I am just a talking head on the screen right now. They did all of the work with Mary and Max. Really appreciate it there. On behalf of our department, we thank you. Ms. Quinn, who's on maternity leave, she says hello to you all. And Mary in the chat put contact information for herself in admissions at Lemoyne, and for Max in financial aid office. Thank you all for joining us. Jimmy, is there anything else? Because I've taken the mic and run with it. Anything else? All right.
I think you're good. I think you covered it. Yep. Thank you guys for taking the time. Yeah. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me or myself, Mr. Gibbons, anybody in the office. And And thank you again, the fine people at Lemoyne.
Go enjoy the rest of your beautiful evening. Take care, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Thanks, Max.
Thank you again, Max.